Hey guys, this is April 1st if you're watching this at the time I told you to, and this is 7th and 8th grade science. And before we get into our science book, I have just a few housekeeping things to go over. So on April 1st, you should have come to school and gotten a packet for your distance learning. And of course, here are all the, got a text message. You know how that goes. So in your distance learning pack, you should have, I believe I put in 2 quizzes that you can do. For this quarantine session, guys, you can do all of your tests, all of your quizzes, open book, not open friend, as in, or open, hey, mom, dad, help me, can you tell me the answer to this? But do open book. That's perfectly fine. We're right at the end of this chapter, which is chapter 8 on reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Yeah, fish. So I am sending home a test grid like you would normally get. The test grid, of course, it's open book. It's open test grid. It might help you find and locate some of your answers a little quicker. That's perfectly fine with me. It's mainly you're going over the information, you're getting it in your brain, you're going to know a little something about reptiles and amphibians that you probably didn't know beforehand. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about before we get started is your wildflower project, because I gave that to you back in February, hoping that we could start botany here right as soon as we get through chapter 8. We're going to go into botany, and then we're going to go into dendrology, which is like trees. And I was hoping that could just kind of carry us through the end of the year as we study all these things. Well, obviously, you're not going to be accessible to me where you can identify wildflowers and things like that. So I am changing the wildflower project. I would love for you all to get out into the open. It's actually good for you to discover wildflowers, but I'm just going to bring that project down just a little bit. Instead of you all having to classify the common name as well as the scientific name with both the genus and the species, what I would prefer you to do is if you can find out the common name, hey, great. Grandma, grandpas, they're normally good at stuff like that, moms and dads as well. So if you can find the common name, great, but if you can't, get your flower, preserve it just like you always, what I put down in my initial paper for you to do. And when we get that turned in, that will still count as 2 test grades. It's just now I'm going to see if you're getting different flowers rather than going through all the classification process like we did. Because I just didn't feel comfortable doing that if you're not there. Now, obviously, if it's a common flower, probably the most common flower you can find right now out in the open would be a dandelion. Then go ahead and put down dandelion. And if you want to put the scientific name for that one, that would be great. But like some of these other ones, you might struggle with. And get out right now. There's all kinds of flowers. I saw in one little 5 square foot section of my yard at least 5 different wildflowers. So some of them were teeny tiny, but that counts. That's a flower. Don't pull up grandma's daffodils and jonquils, though. Those are cultivated flowers. They are not wildflowers. So don't jerk those up, especially if you jerk it up and there's a bulb attached. More than likely that's something that your mom or grandma or somebody planted, and they're probably not going to be super happy with you anyway. If I can find a blue flag iris, which is Tennessee's kind of their state flower, I will try to bring that in to show to you, because that is a natural wildflower that occurs here in Tennessee, and it is really pretty. It does have a bulb kind of with it, but I'll try to find that later. So we're going to finish our science chapter. I did send home a couple of activity sheets for you guys, which is one that we're covering today. It's about the movement of snakes. We went all the way through to page 303 in your science book. In case you forgot what it looked like, it looked like that. And we are going over snake movement, different things about snakes. You have an activity sheet to fill out for that. It's not due until Monday. And I think that's what we're going to start doing from now on, is after tomorrow when I'm doing this on March 31st. So after tomorrow, when you get your folder on April 1st, what you'll do is on Mondays, you'll turn in work and you'll pick up work from your teacher. So when you get tomorrow's folder, you're going to have a couple of quizzes you can take open book. You're going to have a couple of activity sheets that you can take that you can do open book. But remember, my policy on activity sheets is that could easily be a group project. Doesn't have to be, but it can. So if you want to get on FaceTime, or if you all want to do just text back and forth, like, hey, I can't find this. Can you give me the, tell me what page it might be on, or, and things like that. That's perfectly fine with me. In fact, that might make you feel like you're back in class a little. I don't know. The other housekeeping question is, you probably have watched the Bible video, but if you haven't, that one I did in front of the whiteboard. I'm kind of playing with light and stuff. Also, when I did the Bible video, I noticed that I looked like a member of the Walking Dead, but not a good member, like the one that was kind of walking dead. So tried lipstick a little bit. Y'all girls, give me an idea. Is the lighting better here, or is it better in front of the whiteboard? So you can leave a comment below, because what I did discover between today's recording and yesterday's recording is that YouTube is a whole lot easier to fool with than Facebook and trying to upload videos from there. So on YouTube, you all can leave a comment underneath the video, as well as if you go into the private Facebook that I did, you can leave a comment there as well. Also, if you wonder why I keep looking down, it's because I'm supposed to be looking at this green dot, and I keep looking at myself instead of the green dot. So now you know. And we're not going to be doing PowerPoints because I am videoing with my laptop where my PowerPoint's at. Now, there's probably a way to figure that out. I'm not going to be able to figure that out. So just bear with me. You know how kooky I am. So let's get on to our lesson today. We're on page 303 in your book. I am going to go through some stuff. If I have anything to add, it'll be just kind of like class. I would love to stop and have you all look at snake videos or do something like that, but I really can't do that with you. But there's all kinds of safe places that you can look at. We've gone through a lot of 72 dangerous animals. We've done all kinds of things like that. You could look for these movements. If you put in something very careful on YouTube, like snake movement, or well, I don't even want to say that, but rectilinear movement of snakes, it's probably going to bring up only scientific videos when you're looking on YouTube. Then make sure you have the supervision of your parents with you, because most of the time they're pretty good at judging what's good and what's not, so they can help you with that. So, and of course, if I didn't say, my YouTube channel, since if you're linking it from Facebook, is just Brenda Lamb. That's just how it came up. I don't know. So it wasn't anything cool. So let's look at slithering snakes. I'm on page 303. Snakes are legless reptiles with a unique body design. And because snakes do not have limbs, they have to move in weird ways. Because think about it, if you didn't have any limbs, you would have to move in a weird way too to get from point A to point B. The first way that a snake moves is called a lateral undulation. And a lateral undulation is accomplished by the snake, and it's making that sneaky snake, that S-shape movement. It's basically exerting force against surface irregularities following an S shape, and each part of the body passes through those same curves. So that is normally a fast, efficient way for that snake to move, is to make that, and it just, and its entire body is going into that S shape. So there's another type of movement that's called rectilinear movement, and that is where the snake alternately stretches and then shortens its body, allowing portions of its belly to rest on the ground while other areas are lifted up and stretched forward. The snake will keep its body in a straight line as it moves. So this type of motion is very slow. Most of the time, if you see a snake doing that, the snake is doing something. It is stalking prey. So when you see a snake doing rectilinear It's not doing the sneaky snake movement. It's just kind of bunching up and then going like that into a straight line. It's sneaking up on something. Probably, most of the time if you see a snake, snakes are probably more afraid of us than we are of snakes. I know that's weird. So the snake's probably trying to book it away from you as fast as it can. So that's that type of movement, and we've got another type of movement that is called concertina movement. Most of you all probably have no clue what a concertina is, but that's an accordion. So a concertina specifically is just like a little bitty accordion where it's like wah, 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 wah. And it's got little buttons on the side that you can make really simple tunes. It's not like those big mama accordions. I have one of those. I've played an accordion before, not a concertina. But the concertina is what makes the snake looks like an accordion. You've got a good picture of it if you flip the next page and you go to page 304. And on 304, you can see where the snake is just bunching itself up and then stretching out. So, so if you can imagine a concertina or an accordion, you bunch it up and then it stretches back out. Now, a concertina, what happens is the movement of going out is where it's actually taking a breath, like, and then as you squeeze it back in is when you're playing, because it actually has to have some breath to play that. Yeah, that's just a side note. I know it's science music class, well, I am the handbell teacher too. So, the snake pushes its head forward using a coiled reared portion of its body as a brace, and then the snake will pull its back part forward. In sidewinding movement, and you have the sidewinder movement down there on this page too, this is on a particular type of ground because it's not always going to work. It's mainly on a sandy type of ground. The snake's body is pointed at a different angle than its actual direction of motion. So as the snake supports its body with its head and its tail and 2 or 3 other points of contact, it lifts the remainder of its body up off the ground and then it moves across the sand. And as you can imagine, most of these snakes are probably more in an arid environment or a desert environment than probably what we have in places like here. But hey, some snakes around here could get, on some sandy area, and they're probably going to move like that as well. So here's a side note, just so you notice your little brain bite, snakes seem to be fast moving probably because of our fear factor, like they're coming at us really quickly. But one of the fastest snakes, most snakes only travel about 4 miles an hour. The fastest snake is like the black mamba, and it can travel up to about 12.5 miles per hour. We don't have those. Those would be like in Africa and, some Southeast Asia, some of those places there. I'm not a snake expert, so I may have misquoted something. So you all can tell me if you figure out something different. But as we go back into snakes, if we look at snake anatomy, snakes do molt several times. In fact, sometimes that's the only way you have a snake in your house, is because you don't find the snake, you find what the snake left behind. What did the snake leave behind? That's actually happened in my house. Actually, we have found snakes in my house before too. But the snake will molt and then leave its molt behind, or its shed skin behind. So unlike lizards, which shed their skin in pieces, snakes will molt the outer layer of the dead skin into one long piece. And after rubbing their head on a rough surface to create an opening, they will slide out of their dead skin. Instead of eyelids, snakes have transparent scales that cover their eyes, which is kind of wild. So right before a molt, those scales will actually kind of cloud over and leaves the snake susceptible to predators. And that's why sometimes some people will say, all right, if a snake's getting ready to molt, they're more likely to strike. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard that before, because they'll just strike at anything because their eyelids, they can't really see through them too well. But because of its unique shape, a snake's internal anatomy is different from that of most other animals. That just makes sense. They don't have the same shape as us, so they have a different anatomy. One difference is that snakes have over 200 to 400 vertebrae in their vertebral column. And that just makes sense. Their spinal column is really long. When you don't have legs and you don't have arms, your spinal column is going to be pretty long. So also snakes breathe with only one enlarged right lung, and the left lung is either missing in most snakes, or if they got one, it's really reduced in size. Most snakes have poor vision, but they compensate with that. They have poor vision, but they have an exceptional sense of smell. Although the snake has a pair of functioning nostrils, most of the time, have you ever seen a snake come up to somebody going, Now, most snakes use their tongue, and it's a forked tongue, to be able to sniff. So the snake's forked tongue will pick up scent molecules from the air, and then it transfers them to its mouth. And in the roof of the snake, they have an organ that helps them sense their sense of smell from that. And that is your big bold word. I'm pretty sure that's a test question, and maybe even a quiz question. And that's the Jacobson's organ. When the tongue moves past the Jacobson's organ, the scent molecules are detected by the special skin lining the organ. And so that's how, think if we had to try to smell through our mouth, that's not going to work. God gave us a nose, right? So instead of smelling through our mouth, since the snake's nostrils isn't going to work, God gave them a special organ inside their mouth that helps them get the scent on their tongue, and those molecules can go up through the Jacobson's organ to help them. The information is then transferred to the brain, where the snake will identify, hey, that's a mouse, or hey, that's a tortilla chip, or hey, the worst thing that probably a snake could smell is a human. Because you remember, scientifically, we're probably the worst smelling things ever to most things. That was a protection that God gave us to make most things stay away from us, or people. So although snakes don't have external ears or eardrums, they are not deaf. Snakes can hear low frequencies with an internal ear. Snakes are also sensitive to vibrations. Snakes were specially designed with a set of double hinged jaws, and that's because, think about it. You can do all kinds of stuff. We're upright. We can swallow. Gravity helps us. Think of a snake. If they didn't have that double hinged jaw, how much are they going to be able to eat? It's basically bugs or worms, and that's it. So those double hinged jaws are for consuming large prey that they catch. The upper jaw has multiple parts, and the two bottom jaw bones are not fused together, but they're instead very loosely connected by a ligament and membranes, and that allows them to actually kind of pop open their jaws to separate. The snake turns its prey head first and then uses the individual movable parts of its jaw to advance the prey into the esophagus. And there's all kinds of videos, and we've even watched them in the past, of snakes that swallow their prey. And it's a lengthy process. It's not like gulp, it's not, so don't think like this snake can just grab you and eat you within 20 seconds. It's a lengthy process. During the swallowing, the trachea is moved forward so that the snake can continue breathing. A snake will also produce large amounts of saliva to aid in swallowing, which means it's not unusual to see snake drool and kind of bubble when they're trying to swallow all this stuff, because that just helps it. It also has flexible skin. Snake has a flexible skin where it can kind of expand as it accommodates a large meal. The gastric juices in a snake's stomach can digest bones and teeth, but not hair or fur. Whatever is not digested is regurgitated or thrown back up. Because snakes have slow metabolism, though, they don't have to eat for weeks. So I've never experienced feeding snakes. My husband, one of his first jobs was teaching wildlife at a camp, and he had to take care of all these snakes. And so it wasn't one of those deals where, like your dog, you have to feed your dog in the morning, you have to feed your dog in the afternoon. It was like you throw the snake a mouse once a week. So snakes can, basically, they don't have to eat for many weeks. after a large meal. Some snakes only eat 8 to 10 times a year, which that's kind of sad. That's like another curse that God gave the snake, maybe. So, all right. So moving on, let's look at snake reproduction. Snakes produce in litters. Yeah, it's like nice. You don't like snakes? Huh? They have multiple births. So, but they don't call them a litter. They call them a clutch. Several factors, including climate and the influence snake reproduction. Snakes in a tropical climate might reproduce many times throughout the year, while those in a cold climate might only reproduce once a year. So kind of like our climate, we're a temperate climate where our temperatures definitely go down by, multiple degrees. Snakes are only going to produce probably once a year. In a tropical climate, in the equator, more so, okay, it's really glary, but, more in this line with the equator. In those areas, snakes probably produce a lot. And, jungles and the equator is really snaky places anyway. So, anyway, I lost my place. There's 2 species of snakes that can either have live young or lay eggs, depending on where they live. So there's a species of snake, if I live here, I'm going to give birth to live young. If I live here, I'm going to lay an egg. We don't really go into those species. The size of the snake also influences reproduction. The larger a snake, the more offspring it'll have. So big snakes, the biggest snakes we got, like boas and pythons, they can reproduce a clutch of over 100. Now, don't expect 100 of those to survive, because you have learned enough about the animal kingdom to know that quite often snakes, insects, rodents, they produce large numbers of young, mainly because they know the majority of them are not going to survive. That's just a survival technique that God built into them to be like that. So let's move on to probably the scariest part, that's one reason that people do not like snakes. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, you live in a great country, and the United States, we do have venomous snakes, but we really don't have snakes that are going to drop down and just kill you, automatically. Most of the time, especially where we're at, you're within an hour at most from a hospital. So if you know for sure you got bitten by a snake, you can take a picture of that snake and you can head to the hospital, and by the time you get there, the hospital is going to be able to administer some anti-venom. For lots of people who work outdoors, they don't even do that. They just basically say they might just monitor them and kind of watch them for a while. If know of people who've been bitten by a copperhead, what lots of hospitals do is they just monitor the swelling. They kind of do a Sharpie and say, okay, if the swelling gets out of this. Now, obviously, just like what's happening today in our world, if you're immunocompromised, if you're very, very young, if you're very, very old, if you've got lots of underlying health issues, then the hospital might say, hey, we're going to keep you in. We're going to keep you and monitor you. But most of the time, that's not true. Your own body can, fight these off. So can you die from a snake bite? Yeah, but in today's modern world, probably not. Plus, snakes don't really have a big run-in with stuff. So please do not have this unhealthy fear of snakes. But one way that a snake subdues the prey, so if you want to know, why did the Lord put this poison in them? It helps them subdue their prey. Because remember, they're slow moving. It takes them forever to swallow it. So what they have is this venom to protect themselves from prey, from this bear trying to eat it, and 2, for them to subdue the prey with their venom, because the venom does not affect the snake, and it gives them time to swallow that animal. A venom is a poisonous liquid that's produced by the animal, and it contains enzymes and chemicals that destroys portions of a body. Snakes use their long, hollow, or grooved teeth that are called fangs to inject venom into their victim, And then the fangs are actually used to try to hold the victim there supine or still, where they can actually be able to pull them into their mouth. One type of venom is a neurotoxic or a neurotoxin venom, and neurotoxins attacks the nervous system. So it can cause blindness, it can paralyze the diaphragm so that the victim will suffocate. Then we have some venoms that are, so that's a neurotoxic, it's affecting the nervous system. We have some venoms that are hemotoxic. So if you got, think about it, you got neurotoxic, you remember we did this somewhat in health, neurotoxic, that's referring to the nervous system. Now you've got hemotoxic. Earlier in the year we kind of looked at some of those words. Hemo is referring to blood. So hemotoxic is affecting the circulatory system. And effectively what it's trying to do is it's trying to make it to where the red blood cells will not clot, or some hemotoxins even burst. But the hemotoxins take a really long time to work compared to a neurotoxin, which automatically affects the nerves. And right there, guys, before you say, snakes, why do we have those? Some of those toxins have been shown to be beneficial, and even some scientists use them in drugs or even medical therapy. So that's why it's so always important to realize that the Lord put things here to, probably to annoy us sometimes, like mosquitoes and stuff, but there's some benefit from almost everything as well. You know, there's like, so that's just another thing. Don't completely rule out snakes. So often a snake bites the victim, allows the victim to wander off to die, and then the snake, using its forked tongue and its Jacobson's organ, follows the prey in order to get to it and then swallow it. And you can imagine why. Because a snake, I mean, you can basically stomp it and outrun it. I mean, not that I'm promoting that, but most of the time what the snake is killing, it is more threatening to the snake than the snake is to it. And so that's why it has to use a neurotoxin or a hemotoxin to be able to bite something, slow it down, and then it go after it. But before we go into, we might as well go into snake bites. We're going a little past our thing. So actually, it's getting close to about 30 minutes, and I really did not want to go much over 30 minutes because we just know sometimes that's how long we can think about it. So I'm going to end there. Tomorrow we're going to start on page 305, and we're going to start with snake bites, and we're going to start looking at snake bites and maybe just discussing that a little bit more. So since this is April 1st, snake bites will come up on April 2nd. We'll do that. We'll finish up snakes, and we might get into a little bit on turtles. We'll just see how far we can get. So one thing I forgot to do before we started this is I forgot to pray before we started, but that's perfectly fine because we can pray to end. So just come together with me now to go to the Lord in prayer. So Heavenly Father, we just praise you and we thank you for just your wonderful world of creation that you've given us. And Father, as you loved us before we ever even acknowledged and loved you, just help us to just look at creation and to also just look at others around us and help us to love them as you would have us to love them. And Father, we just praise you, give you thanks, and thank you for this day. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen. See you later, guys.